Hi guys, welcome back. Lesson 9 will be about monopoly and why this particular market structure may lead to market failure. So a monopoly is a type of market structure in which there is one dominant seller of a particular product. There are less available substitutes and a monopoly usually has more than 25% of the market share. For example, Microsoft in terms of desktop operating systems has around 75% to 80% of the total market share. And a pure monopoly is when the seller has 100% of the total market share. Because there are no close substitutes available, the firm faces no competition. In reality, this type of market structure is quite rare. Natural monopolies occur in industries with high startup costs. New entrants may need to put in place large-scale, expensive infrastructure to supply the good to consumers. Some good examples are broadband network, water supply, gas and electricity. Another characteristic of natural monopolies is the presence of economies of scale. And this is the idea that as output increases, average cost actually begins to fall. Now, the output in a competitive market would be where demand equals supply, and we know this is called the equilibrium point. However, in a monopolistic market, the output is actually below the equilibrium point, and the price increases to point P2. The monopoly is trying to increase profits by charging consumers a higher price. However, this reduces consumer surplus and creates a deadweight loss to society. At point Q1, the market is said to be allocatively efficient because this is the maximum output that we can reach where there is no welfare loss created. In contrast to point Q2, in which price is higher and there is a deadweight loss to society. So we have lost the allocatively efficient point in a monopolistic market. Let's take a look at some of the reasons why monopolies exist. The key point here are barriers to entry, which stop new entrants from entering the existing market. Structural or natural barriers to entry are mostly associated with cost. An example of this barrier to entry would be economies of scale. As output increases, long-run average cost actually begins to fall. Economies of scale is something which is achieved through being in the market for a particular number of years, and new entrants would not be able to compete with these margins. Next, we have statutory or legal barriers to entry. An example would be a patent. So if you had an invention to stop others from selling the same product, you can apply for a patent which gives you the exclusive right to sell your invention. So a monopoly could actually have a number of patents to stop new entrants from selling their product. We also have strategic or tactical barriers to entry. An example would be predatory pricing. This is when the monopoly sells at a price below cost, which would force new entrants out of the market. The monopoly would be able to do this as they'll most likely have built up huge profits over the years, allowing them to make this short-term loss. Other barriers to entry include brand loyalty, which is when consumers tend to stick to buying from the same brand because of reputation or quality of products. For example, brand loyalty with products such as Apple or ordering from Amazon. And another barrier to entry would be vertical integration. This is when a firm controls the supply chain of a good. It will then be able to keep prices high when new entrants try and purchase these goods. It will deter them from entering the market. Now let's look at the advantages and disadvantages of a monopoly market structure. One advantage could be lower prices due to economies of scale. You could also argue that because monopolies make supernormal profits by charging consumers higher prices, the profits could be used to invest in more research and development, which would then increase dynamic efficiency. Another advantage would be that the monopoly may actually be efficient due to, again, using its supernormal profits to invest in the latest technology, which may reduce long-run cost. And this then could be passed on to consumers in the form of lower prices. A disadvantage would be diseconomies of scale. Now, this is when output increases, so does cost. We can see on the graph as output increases beyond point Q1, cost actually begins to increase. This may be due to poor or lack of communication between staff in a growing firm, or even demotivated staff. Another point is that prices may actually increase for consumers, especially in markets in which demand is inelastic, and from lesson 5 you will know that this means demand is less responsive to a change in price. So what monopolies can actually do is charge a price which is allocatively inefficient, as we saw in the previous graph, creating a welfare loss to society. The lack of competition that monopolies face is also another disadvantage. They may not have enough incentive to reinvest their profits to improve efficiency. And because there are little or no substitutes available in a monopolistic market, the lack of choice available to consumers is another disadvantage. Let's summarize. So we know in a monopolistic market structure, there is welfare loss generated to society and market failure as a result. Pure monopolies are those in which the seller has 100% of the market share. Natural monopolies are those in which there are very high startup costs and also economies of scale. Monopolies exist due to barriers to entry, which can be structural, statutory, or strategic barriers to entry, and we also have things like brand loyalty and vertical integration. Advantages include economies of scale, investment in research and development, investment in technology, which would increase efficiency and lower prices for consumers. Disadvantages include diseconomies of scale, higher prices for consumers, little incentive to invest due to the lack of competition, and the lack of choice for consumers.